Mac on Twitter. Recently, you've discussed how Tennessee should be on the rise again, maybe becoming a national contender under Jeremy Pruitt. Now, I'm a big North Carolina fan. What do you think the ceiling is for Carolina football? We don't have the history of Tennessee, but based off national brand, academics, Chapel Hill, do you think North Carolina has what it takes to be a national title contender even after Mac Brown leaves? Bookmark that. Darian on Twitter. Also, how can South Carolina turn the program around and sort of mimic what Tennessee is doing? Do you believe Muschamp is the person to do it? So, two different challenges here. Obviously, we're talking about an ACC team and we're talking about an SEC team. I think with the North Carolina question, which was can they be sort of a long-term, sustained national championship contender? Can they be relevant in the national conversation even after Mac Brown leaves? Well, that's all contingent on what their long-term investment into football is. It's really tough to be all in invested in two sports. It's not impossible. Schools have done it, but you're talking about not a 2 or 3 year stretch where you just get a magical ride together and everyone's all in on football for a little while. Now, you got to be all in the 8 and 4 years too. If they are that, then certainly. Right now, the state of the ACC is such that behind Clemson, it's wide open for someone to ascend to that number 2 spot. And if you're the number 2 spot in a conference, anything can happen in any given year. So certainly they could be that. But number 2, I think that they're set at quarterback right now with Sam Howell and then Drake May committed. Like, I think they're in a really good spot at quarterback. And if you've got quarterback figured out, as we've said on this show a million times, it makes a lot of other dominoes kind of fall into place easier. Easier. It's not a guarantee, but easier. But here's what I need to know. North Carolina's hot recruiting right now, but there are a lot of unusual suspects that are hot recruiting. And you get the sense, told you, I talked to Nick Saban about this today, you'll hear it in due time. A lot of programs like Alabama are ranked in the 40s in recruiting, and we've got like Minnesota in the top 10. This is no disrespect to Minnesota. Bama's coming. Like, programs like that aren't sitting in the 40s. North Carolina's in the top 5. They've been there for a long time. I think that this class for North Carolina has staying power because all the kids are from North Carolina. They haven't gone to Colorado and North Dakota and all these places. They've gotten in-state kids. Is that sustainable? Am I going to see North Carolina sustain a top 10 year-in, year-out recruiting effort? That's hard to see. Not impossible. I think one of the most underrated geographical recruiting hotbeds in America is that Carolina area, North Carolina. Always been a great place to go get players. If you can just keep those kids in state, or the vast majority of them, you could put on the field an annual contender. Notice how many ifs I just included there in that brief synopsis. Now with Carolina, as Darian asked, is Muschamp the guy? I'd lean no right now. I've been called, when I was doing this show in Columbus, they called me Cocky Junior. It's called at every turn I found a way to defend Will Muschamp. And if you're not careful, I'll still do it. Will Muschamp is a guy who I thought was unfairly labeled as a forever failure because he didn't get the job done at Florida. If we're thinking along those lines, it's impossible for Ed Orgeron to just have done what he did at LSU because he was a quote-unquote failure in his only other stop as a head coach at Ole Miss. So you're not always confined to what your previous results have defined you as. I mean, there are a lot of folks who are millionaires now who have been bankrupt at various points in their life. So failure now can be success down the road. However, we have not seen big-time success at South Carolina. I wondered, is he going to take the lessons he learned from failures at Florida and use them as a springboard at South Carolina? Very mixed results so far. Now, what they have done is they've energized the fan base. They've gotten a ton of support. They've built really good facilities. I think they're swinging well above their skis when it comes to facility and donation and whatnot in South Carolina. And that's good. And that's a good reflection on the head coach. Offensively, they've been terrible. I mean, by comparison of their biggest rivals, they've been terrible. And so you bring in Mike Bobo, and we've beaten this to death. We can't know anything more until they strap it up and play, but I've just never felt like they are a special enough preparation to differentiate themselves from the big boys. And here's the problem. If we are to assume for a second, as you did in this question, that Tennessee is sort of on the rise, then if you project, if everything just continues on its current respective trajectories, you're going to be an underdog every year to Georgia. You're going to be an underdog every year to Florida. You're going to be an underdog every year to Tennessee. That's separate from whoever else you play. You may be able to upset one of them. Any given Saturday, you can go into Athens, be +4 turnovers, and come out with a narrow win. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about pulling one big upset a year? Are we talking about contending? If you're talking about contending, you're not going to consistently upset teams. You're going to not consistently upset a critical mass of them, maybe one of them, not a critical mass. You got to do something different. To this point, the reason why the answer is maybe for North Carolina and probably not for South Carolina is because North Carolina, don't kid yourself, is in a much more favorable position conference-wise, and also because regardless of that, I don't know that South Carolina has made the necessary changes to its identity, to its football identity, to fit the classification of a program that you're about to stamp with the, keep an eye on them sort of stamp. I don't think they make those.